Hey guys, it's been a minute, a month to be exact, but here we are with part 9 of Complex PTSD, From Surviving to Thriving by Peter Walker. We're starting chapter 3, Improving Relationships. This ought to be helpful because, as we all know, when we are I don't even want to word it, when we are not able to control our responses due to trauma and us not being handed tools yet to figure out how to handle that. All relationships, all of them, work, family, friends, lovers, marital spouses, they all suffer. Even meeting a stranger could suffer. I mean, our ability to respond to people is greatly diminished until we figure out how to not be responsive, how to be the witness in the situation, and hopefully this will help. I'm a little tired. I stayed up last night to see, last night was the 18th, today's the 19th of November 2021, and we had partial, which was 97% of the moon being covered up by an eclipse, and it was quite powerful. But yeah, a little tired because it was at 2:02 that it peaked, so excuse the lower energy. Chapter 3, Improving Relationships. Forewarning. Oh God, it starts with a forewarning. There are instances of parental betrayal so extreme that it is not fair or reasonable to expect the survivor to try to trust human beings again. If the recommendation in this chapter to open to the help of others feels too upsetting or overwhelming, please feel free to skip this chapter. There is a great deal of other material in this book that can help alleviate the many symptoms of complex PTSD, and since recovery is relative and never complete, you do not need to implement everything in this book. As they say in the 12-step movement, take the best and leave the rest. Moreover, as I have experienced personally, and as numerous of my clients and website respondents have demonstrated to me, real relational healing can and does not come from non-human sources. This makes sense. This is especially true of what is this word? Mammalian. Mammalian pets, or animals with warm blood and hair. Okay. Mammalian pets whose attachment needs and wiring are similar enough to ours that mutually healing connections can evolve between us. I know Dexter was a huge part of my life. It still is, obviously. Hi, Dexter, I love you. But I couldn't go anywhere without him. He had to be right next to me, and or my cats had to be. I had to have my pet with me, or I wasn't okay. Which was not, in retrospect. I'm not going to judge myself. In retrospect, I'm glad that I'm not that attached to my animals. I love my animals, don't get me wrong. I spoil my animals. But during my journey the last 3-4 years, I ended up in a reservation, a Hopi reservation, with my 2 city cats and Dexter. And in my 2.5 months stay there, res dogs, we shall call them, ate both my cats, or killed them. Didn't eat them, killed them. One of them died in my arms. Little Bit, who had helped me through my divorce, and it was within a 10-day period. They didn't die in the same day, and it was in that traumatic time, since I had no family, I had no friends, really. Just all these new people that I met. I left everything. My pets were extremely important and vital to me. So attached to them. And then when two of them were taken away, one that I had for 11 years, one that I had just gotten that year that got me through my divorce, it healed something. I remember when I was holding Little Bit as he died in my arms, I just ranted off blessings to him of everything he'd done to make me happy and smile and forget my woes. And I just thanked him and loved him and said, "Go in peace. You have done such wonders in my life. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you." Then a few days later, Lily went, the one I had for 11 years. And Dexter was left. And I can now look back at that experience and recognize that, as weird as this sounds, any of my pets could die. And it's not going to break me. And I couldn't have known that until it happened. And because I went right into gratitude, I was just able to release them. And now I'm not attached to my pets. I love my pets, but I'm not attached to them. But the way life is, shit, I wouldn't have known it if they both hadn't died so violently right next to each other. So, yeah, if you're attached to your pet right now in an overabundant way, like I had been, I'd freak out constantly about them. Know that you can get over that. You can let a pet go. You can let your mother go. You can let your husband go. You can let all your friends go. You can let your entire previous life pretty much go, and it won't kill you. And all that attachment you feel to some of these things, perhaps now in your life, that you are like, I could never live without them, or without this or that. Lies. Those are lies. Yes, you can. The possibilities are endless. And you could start your life over and over again if you choose. And hopefully in that trial and error, you will find home and good people that make you realize that you're not crazy and that life is good. Attachment, all that rant over attachment and pets, but it's real. Moreover, where were we? Mammalian pets whose attachment needs and wiring are similar enough to ours that mutually healing connections can evolve between us. Obviously, without my pets, this story having just finished, aside, God knows how I would have gotten through it completely alone. Would I have? Probably. At this point in my life, after all these things that have happened, I now know I can get through anything, and I hope that you can get there too. Now, what they're talking about here is the positive parts, and I have heard that there's a lot of research when it comes to horses and people, especially complex PTSD soldiers, survivors of military battles. When they put them together with a horse, or even gang members, that's the other extreme. When they put them together in these camps that have horses, they find an incredibly healing connection that keeps them away, their mind and their emotions away from the bad things. And it focuses on this huge, beautiful beast that's very reactive and very attuned to how the individual in front of them is feeling. And so they have to check their own feelings in order to get the horse to get along with them. So it's a beautiful thing. Moving on, dogs and cats can be tremendous sources of what Carl Rogers described as the unconditional positive regard that your children must have in order to thrive. Wait, what? Cats and dogs can be a tremendous source of what Carl Rogers describes as the unconditional positive regard or care or concern that young children must have in order to thrive. Okay. Other therapeutic relational sources include nature, surrounded by mountains right now, 8,000 feet up, and I'm surrounded by mountains. It's amazing. Welcome to Crestone. If you have never been, do try to put it on your bucket list. Other therapeutic relational sources include nature, music, and the arts. Duh. I will go on a huge rant if I try to put my input on that, so I won't. Moreover, for some survivors, authors of helpful books can be kept at safe distances while they contribute to your healing. Okay. Finally, even the most heinous betrayals, miracles sometimes happen in terms of discovering a healing human connection, particularly in the latter stages of recovery. Completely agree. I call them familiars. You will start running into people that you're like, I know this person. I know this person from somewhere. Where do I know this person from? And you realize, no, you are in completely different states or even countries, and there's no way in hell you could have met each other before. But the second you meet them, you feel safe and at home. Those are familiars. And yeah, the further you get on your recovery in those latter stages, when you're not in retraction, when you're not either fighting or flighting or, fawning or, when it's just normal, healthy connection, they naturally come into your life. And right now I'm where I'm at in this little community. I'm surrounded by women of varying ages and two cool dudes, but my friends and neighbors and coworkers that I live here with. And I can't tell you how amazing it feels to be surrounded by positive feminine energy, and we all look out for each other. And I couldn't have asked for this 3-4 years ago. I didn't know it existed. But as I healed myself, these connections just come. Trust me, they'll come if you keep persevering. Complex PTSD as an attachment disorder. Many therapists see complex PTSD as an attachment disorder. This means that as a child, the survivor grew up without a safe adult to healthily bond with. Thank God I had my grandfather. As bears repeating, complex PTSD almost always has emotional neglect at its core. A key outcome of this is the child has no one in the formative years who models the relational skills that are necessary to create intimacy or the state of being close. When the developmental need to practice healthy relating with the caretaker is unmet, survivors typically struggle to find and maintain healthy, supportive relationships in their adult lives. Makes sense, doesn't it? Monkey see, monkey do. If you haven't experienced that in your childhood, how do you know it exists? How do you know how to look for it properly? The origin of social anxiety. A child who grows up with no reliable human source of love, support, and protection typically falls into a great deal of social unease. He naturally becomes reluctant to seek support from anyone, and he is forced to adopt self-sufficiency as a survival strategy. Needing anything from others can feel especially dangerous. The survivor's innate capacity to experience comfort and support in relationships become very limited or even non-existent. This is despite the fact that many high-functioning survivors learn to socially function quite adequately. I learned my social skills in theater. I did 19 years of theater, and that's theater productions with lots of people and deadlines. That's how I learned my social graces. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had a clue. This is particularly the case in structured situations where expectations are clear and common goals take the focus off conversing and put it on task accomplishments. Wow. Unstructured social situations, however, like attending parties or just hanging out, can be considerably more triggering. Maybe that's why I love working so much. Oh, you have a project for me? Let me spend all my time and effort, and then I can hang out. And this is how I get to meet, like currently, really good friends. They're my bosses and coworkers. Do I know anybody outside of that in this current Crestone community? 2 friends outside of work. Yeah. So maybe I still need to be working on this a little. Unstructured social situations, however, like attending parties or just hanging out, can be considerably more triggering. Spontaneous self-expression feels like the same setup for disaster that it was in childhood. Or you can go the opposite direction, and when you are hanging out with people, whether at work or wherever else, you overshare. Oversharing can be dangerous, even though it can seem natural to not want to hide anything about yourself to others. It may not be the wisest thing to overshare. It's the opposite of the extreme of this, because then people don't need to be knowing everything about you. I've heard this for years, but I still haven't figured out how to nip that in the butt, or if I actually have to, if it's wrong in me, or if it actually is a good thing. Transparency. I don't know. Something to think on. Either way, structured or spontaneous, relating often involves hiding a great deal of anxiety and discomfort. One very successful businessman client of mine told me, "I'm so cool, calm, and collected in meetings. A veritable wordsmith with the composure of Michael Caine." And that's an author that writes very, very good books, from what I hear. I'm a king on the outside, but on the inside, I'm a drama queen, anguishing in doubt and shame about everything I say or do. In worst case scenarios, social anxiety can devolve into social phobia, especially during prolonged flashbacks. Ugh, prolonged flashbacks are the worst. We're the worst. Extensive childhood abuse installs a powerful "people are dangerous" program. When I was at my least recovered, I couldn't take out the garbage when I was in a flashback. I feared that my neighbor, my sweet, always affirming neighbor, would look out the window and see how wretched and pitiful I was. Even worse, I dreaded the prospect that she might come out and want to interact with me. Nevertheless, I socialized for decades when necessary, and seemed to be doing it with a considerable amount of success, no matter how dreadful the reviews were from my critic, that critic in your head. I even eventually came to see, when not in flashback, that a lot of people really liked me. I totally can relate to this. Unfortunately, however, I rarely derived any satisfaction or comfort from this perspective, because underneath my smooth persona, I was writhing in discomfort and typically measuring the time until I could at least obstrusively make my escape. Yeah. Again, me the opposite. When I feel this way, and more as I got out of my trauma and toxicity environment, I'm like, holy shit, people really do like me. Like, people don't call me an idiot or tell me to calm down or ask me what's wrong with me. People generally, since I gotten out of that hell, people like me. It's pretty cool. And I felt like this, but for me, instead of feeling the way he does, all messed up inside, I'm more of like oblivious, where all the word vomit comes from, and I overshare, and I'm just like, yeah, da 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 da, like they're my lifelong friends forever, even though I just met them or whatever. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe in a way, in a new perspective, we are all, I believe, fractals of each other. So maybe there is nothing wrong with me oversharing. Again, that's one of the ones that I haven't figured out yet. Okay, a journey of relational healing. The incident I am about to describe marked a huge step in my long, gradual journey of opening to real intimacy. I was sitting on my porch with my dog George, the only being I could truly relax with, when he broke his lead and sprinted across the street in pursuit of a cat. Before he could get to the cat, he was run over by a car. Or eaten by, or killed by res dogs in front of you. Both axles run over. It was the worst thing that ever happened in my adult life. And when the shock or the disassociation wore off, I was drowning in abandonment mirage. Well, to finish the story, because that sounds absolutely horrendous. And then I think back, well, when your cat died in your arms, your precious cat, you're so attached to cat. Like, oh my God, my cat is everything cat. Little bit. He bit me. I still have the scar because he had just been attacked by 3 dogs. I still carry the scars where he bit me when I was holding him, when I got him away from the dog. My friend got him away from the dogs and then I handed me. How did I not shut down after that? In that moment, I looked at him, even as he had bit me, and I was so proud of him that he was still fighting. I'm like, yeah, that's right, that's my little bit. And I just started flowing with love and telling him all the reasons I loved him. And I think that because I went to that place of absolute gratitude for him in the moment, this is his dying moment. And I just want to smother him with love and light. And that's what I did. Later that night, I was waiting for my soul to break. Little Bit was dead. Then Lily. But instead, what I did both of those nights, 10 days apart, is I went into meditation and I spoke to them. And what I said doesn't matter here, but I was very specific and clear with them. I even gave them jobs to do. And I thank them for always being with me, as I to this day realize they still are. We're all eternal. We're all fractals of each other. Yeah, even that person that pisses you off or makes you uncomfortable or makes you cry. Even them. They're a fractal of you. And nothing really ends. We all just become, I believe, when we die, we end up going to a place where we all recognize and know each other so well that we almost laugh. We laugh. We go, oh, all that drama and all that, so that we could get back to here and know that we know everything about all of us. We are all one. I hope that made sense, because this is tragic. Seeing his dog died and then feeling that way. I would go with what I did. See your animal or whoever is gone now that you were thoroughly attached to, and figure it out, man. Just fall into gratitude and love them, and know that even if they hurt you or they're gone now unexpectedly, that they're still there with you, and be grateful for all the time you had, because what else are you gonna do? Apparently this guy was drowning in the abandonment mirage. Beyond devastated, I felt panicky and catatonic at the same time, as I had to in childhood when feeling overwhelmed. I hid in my room for 36 hours, dreading contact with my fair weather friend roommates. I was 28 and still thoroughly phobic about showing any vulnerability. All my relationships had been developed under the guise of my people-pleasing, funny guy persona, and in my current state, there was not a joke anywhere to be found. There was no way I could let myself be seen in what felt like a repulsive condition. I could not sleep, and as sleep deprivation deteriorated into fear. Yes, sweetie. I was I could not sleep, and as sleep deprivation deteriorated into fear that I was truly going crazy, out of nowhere came this amazing grace. Grace disguised in a form I usually abhorred. It was the grace of a deep surrender into weeping, a long sobbing release, more soothing than anything I had ever experienced before. It was the release I described in chapter 11, and extensively throughout my first book. When the tears were cried out, I knew I would be okay, and I knew I was not going to go crazy. I could face my roommates with the realest, perhaps the first sense of self-esteem I had ever known, and from that point on, I knew I wanted more of these incredibly healing tears. So, you see, some of the most horrible things that happened to you. Like this, like his dog dying in front of him, getting run over, chasing a cat. Maybe there was karma in there. No, sorry. Or my cat's getting killed by dogs in front of me. If it wasn't for their sacrifice, maybe that sacred contract we had, that's why we were so attached. We had, as souls, spirits, as energy spirits, had decided to play out this scenario in this lifetime. And those animals come in, you have the scenario, they go out, and after the pain, like this guy and like I did, you realize how incredibly powerfully healing and good and positive it was for you to go through that. Because now you're not attached. Now you're not dependent on something outside of yourself to find that grace. Wow. Healing the shame that binds us in loneliness. This will be the last section before I stop the video. Healing the shame that binds us in loneliness. I soon discovered, however, that my tears were as stuck as they had ever been, or at least since I was 6. The last time I could remember crying. Further reading and researching then led me to seek help, and so ensued my baptism into therapy. Blessed by the great fortune of finding a good enough therapist on the first try. Wow, what a lucky son of a gun. On his first try, he got a good enough therapist. Fuck. I had 8 therapists, counselors, whatever the fuck, all within 2.5 years. They sucked so bad. And then I found a free one. A fellow survivor with a master's degree. So yeah, he lucked out. A center aspect of the truly helpful relational work was that John Bradshaw called healing the shame that binds. I believe toxic shame cannot be healed without some relational help. Several therapists and groups aided me greatly to unbind from the shame that made me hide whenever I could not invoke my perfect persona. Concurrently, I learned that real intimacy correlated with the amount I shared. I learned that real intimacy correlated with the amount I shared my vulnerabilities. So maybe by oversharing my vulnerabilities, it's helped me be open and trusting to people. See, maybe it is a good thing. Okay, as I increasingly practiced emotional authenticity, the glacier of my lifelong loneliness began to melt. It is important to note here that groups can be even more powerful for the healing of shame than individual work. This is because there is typically more mutual vulnerability in a group than in individual work. Moreover, feeling compassion for someone who has suffered similarly to us sometimes naturally expands into feeling the same for ourselves. Therapeutic relational experience enhanced my self-compassion considerably further than what I was able to accomplish on my own. Moreover, I believe that insufficient self-compassion is the worst developmental arrest of all. and restored self-compassion is the keystone of all effective recovery. I couldn't agree more. In retrospect, I can clearly see that as my self-compassion increased, my toxic shame decreased. Modern advances in neuroscience, see the general theory of love, suggest that we are instinctively limited in our ability to emotionally regulate and soothe ourselves. More and more research suggests that our ability to metabolize painful emotional states is enhanced by communicating with safe enough other person. I like how he says good enough therapist or safe enough other person. Don't be looking for the perfect person to console you and take care of you from the outside. It's someone good enough that you can share your experiences with, that can relate, or at least can listen and can have enough sympathy and what's that word? Be empathic enough to be able to understand where you're coming from. Okay, one more and then I'll finish. Finding good enough relational help. In Chapter 13, I provide guidance about how to shop for a good enough therapist. I also explore more deeply the principle of therapeutic relational healing to help you know what is reasonable to expect from your therapist. I have also met a number of survivors who have been lucky enough to get this kind of relational healing from a partner. Oh, lucky. Or a friend. Wow. Talk about hitting a gold mine. Typically, one who has good enough parents or who has a lot of recovery. Finally, attachment theorists have developed the concept of earned secure attachment to describe the recovered enough state where the attachment disorder of complex PTSD becomes sufficiently healed. This is typically evidenced by the survivor forming at least one supportive and reliable enough relationship. Well then, I am thoroughly healing because I have 3 people, and it's starting to grow really fast. Actually, I dare say I have 5 people I can feel comfortable around and be open with. Many of the successful therapists I have guided come to an end when the client gains an earned, secure relationship outside of our therapy. This is typically a partner or a best friend with whom the person can truly be themselves. Another potential source of relational healing is the co-counseling relationship. Guidelines for creating a co-counseling relationship are also contained in Chapter 13, 10 chapters away. We'll get there. Many respondents to my website have reported glowingly about the help they get from others through online recovery groups and forums. These groups can be particularly helpful for those who still find it difficult to be vulnerable in person. And on that note, Trauma Academy is a channel on, I don't know if it's still on YouTube, but it helped me tremendously to deal with my childhood sexual abuse. Tremendously. These ladies that did this. So if you're suffering from that, and there's a lot of feminine energy there. So hopefully, if you're male and need that help, it'll be of help too. But it was called Trauma University. You can find that on YouTube. These groups can be particularly helpful for those who still find it difficult to be vulnerable in person. Sometimes the distance and relative anonymity of these forums can decrease the fear of self-disclosure, and this in turn can enhance therapeutic relating. An increasing number of therapists also seem to be offering telephone sessions for the same reason. The section Finding Online Help group in Chapter 13 lists recommended online groups. If you want me to put what Finding the Online Group section of Chapter 13 is, the resources from that in the comments, I will. So just ask in the comments and I'll skip ahead and get you that information. And I guess that's going to be it for tonight. The next one up that we're going to be doing is these words: parentoctomy and relational healing. So I'm guessing it has something to do with the parents. Parentoctomy? Yes. All right. Well, much love from Creststone, and see you next time. Be healed. You got this. Okay. Love you. Bye.